Everybody. The way this is going to work today is I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Katie Miller and her work. Katie is going to do a reading, and then we're going to open it up to questions. I have some questions that I will ask. If you have any questions that you want to ask, you will be able to do so, but please do so through chat by using the chat function. We also ask that you mute your microphone and turn off your camera for the duration of this, well, for the rest of your entire life. No, actually, for the duration of this event, please, and thank you. So anyway, Katie Miller was born in Hamilton sometime after World War II and is a highly acclaimed author of award-winning short stories, which she has published in Maisonneuve magazine, The Walrus, the Capilano Review, Canadian Forum, the New Quarterly, Prism International, the Journey Prize Anthology, and elsewhere. Her work has appeared in several other anthologies and has been broadcast by the CBC. Her collections include All Saints, which was shortlisted for the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize in 2014. Late Breaking was also a nominee for the Giller Prize, the Governor General's Award for Fiction, the Trillium Awards, and the Toronto Book Awards. And that's really all I wanted to say, and I think that says it all. So please, Katie, if you would like to take it from here.
Thank you very much, Marcel. I'd like to write. Well, that was a great start, wasn't it? I would like to read part of the first story in Late Breaking, which is my latest book of short stories. And I don't think it needs any introduction. The story is called The Last Trumpet, and I'll just read. Len Sparks has started to look forward to the advice column in the Sackville Tribune Post. Reading about the situations people get themselves into charges him up in the morning. Idiot, he will all but snort over his cereal. How and why? Crackling the paper, shaking his head, while Sister watches him with her worried beagle eyes. How and why? This morning, what he reads makes him go so still and quiet that Sister comes close, kneading his palm on her head to forestall a whine. A woman has written in about her impending death, specifically her burial. She wants to be placed in her late husband's coffin, turned on her side to face him, so that when the last trumpet sounds and they wake to the resurrection, they will embrace each other with joy and rise together. Len has to read the letter a second time to be sure the writer is serious. She must be very old, he thinks, then reminds himself that he's 86. But still, are there people today who actually believe that kind of thing? Take it literally? The advice columnist's name is Fran, and she gets it right most of the time. With this poor soul, she is gentle, tactful. She suggests that the woman talk to her pastor, then perhaps discuss the matter with an undertaker. Len feels a stab of pity, imagining each man wondering whether to laugh or cry. Sister is resting her chin on his knee. He starts in on a good scratch, neck to tail, that makes her close her eyes and sigh deep in her throat. That's enough now, he says after a minute. Go lie down, go. Sister obeys, padding to her wicker bed lined with the cushion whose plaid is dim under a layer of shed hair. Len supposes he should have the thing cleaned. Did Joe never send it out to be cleaned? He can't remember. He stirs the coffee he poured before he sat down so it would be cool enough to drink when he got to it after his cereal and canned peaches. He can't stop thinking about that letter. What would it be like to have a rock-solid belief in something like the resurrection of the body? To be able to put aside all logic, quiet all questions and doubts, simply not see images of putrefaction and protruding bone. He sips his coffee, puts more milk in from the small pitcher, his shaking hand making it slop a little into the saucer. It used to drive Joe nuts the way he drank his coffee almost cold. I can pour it the night before and leave it in the fridge for you if you like, she said more than once. He'll visit her this afternoon. It's the first of the month, October. Might not be able to do it again till spring. For years after she died, he kept his monthly appointment at her grave, regardless of the weather. But the last few winters have been fierce, deep snow and ice storms. Last year, he actually got one of those pronged attachments for the tip of his cane. He hates it, the way it resembles the claws of some strange beast. I've become a strange beast, sister, he says aloud. The dog hears her name and raises her head, looking at him hopefully. No, not yet. Just settle down. We'll go for a you-know-what in a little while. Even now, in her 12th year, she goes all puppyish if she hears walk. He wonders if she still misses Brother, or even remembers him. Brother was always the more rambunctious of the two, and one day when he was barely a year old, he ran into the street and was hit. Len insisted on letting sister see and sniff the body so that she would understand that Brother was dead. But it didn't seem to work. She took on a puzzled air, poking into every corner of the house, searching the face of each visitor as if to say, "Do you know where Brother went?" Or at least that's how it seemed to Len. Joan was more prosaic. She's not all that bright. Just give it time. She'll forget he ever existed. She never said so, but Len knew that of the two, Joan would have preferred to lose sister. Brother was definitely her dog. Their personalities matched. Curious, adventurous, demanding. Len folds the last section of the paper, places it on top of the other sections, and squares the pile. Then he stacks his breakfast dishes, plate, saucer, cereal bowl, fruit bowl, coffee cup, readies himself to get up. He still refuses to bring his cane to the table. The cane is for outside. Its place is in the brass umbrella stand by the front door. The day he'd allow himself to hobble around with it in the kitchen. He pushes his chair back and gets carefully to his feet, thinking through the distance from table to sink. So far, so good. None of that sickening lightheadedness he's had of late, forcing him to sit right back down. Now, dishes to the counter, then papers to the recycle bin under the sink. 2 trips. Is the stack of dishes rattling more than it did yesterday? Would a tray help? He could maybe assemble his breakfast things the night before on a tray. It's the turning around that's a bugger. Well, he could set his place at the other end of the table, facing the sink. 6 steps. There. Set the pile on the counter with a minimum of clatter and slide. Now do the whole thing over again to get the newspapers into the box. Jesus. A tray. Does he even have a tray? Joan used to bring drinks out to guests. He tries to picture her. Would she have used a tray for that? She'd never let him help, that was for sure. His job was to entertain, be all chuckly and urbane in the living room. If there was ever a crash and a whispered "shit" from the kitchen, he would rise and go, saying, "My lady wife hath need of me." Then when she hissed at him to just keep out of her way, he would reemerge, give the company a seraphic smile, and say, "Every day a honeymoon." Company. Joan did love a party for all her fussing. Probably loved the fussing, too. Mostly couples they'd have over back in the day, neighbors, his colleagues from the school, hers from all her volunteer jobs, a few singles, men, usually. Joan was a man's woman, no doubt about that. Len pauses in the middle of gathering up the papers. There was that one guy, tall, balding, on the Arts Festival committee with Joan. Was he the one with the silver Honda? Would he have come to the house, taken a drink, shaken Len's hand? No way to know, and no point dwelling on it now. It's in the past. He's made it to the sink for the 2nd time. The papers are in the box. He'll wash the dishes, sit for a bit, then take sister for her walk. It's cold for early October. He should have worn his heavier coat, his November coat as he thinks of it. The windbreaker that got him through September is just light enough this morning to leave him chilled. He could have used gloves, too. How do animals manage the temperature extremes, he wonders, watching sister meander and sniff, seeking the perfect place to squat. All this one has is the same short pelt all year round. True, he does tie her coat on her in the winter and puts booties on her feet for the salt, but still. He doesn't know much about beagles, where they originated, why they were bred to be the way they are. Something to do this afternoon. Google beagles. Sister has finished and watches apologetically as Len plants his cane, bracing himself with it to go down on one knee and pick up the mess with the hand already inside the plastic bag. It's all about preparation, he thinks, hoisting himself back up onto his feet. He stashes the plastic bag in the first waste container he finds, then heads down bridge to Maine. He and sister always enter the waterfowl park near St. Paul's, where Joan was rector's warden the 2 years before she was killed. Her funeral was huge. Crowds spilling out the door. People he barely knew coming close to take his hand or squeeze his shoulder and murmur something. None of them the face he kept looking for, in spite of himself. Surely the guy wouldn't have the gall? Or would he? Slip in the back at the last minute? Slip out again just before the end? Take off in his silver Honda? They pass St. Paul's, then take the path to the boardwalk. They're a bit late this morning, so the mist has mostly lifted off the water. Still, there is that point on the near horizon where everything dissolves into gray, no distinction between water and sky. The sight always cheers Len for some reason. Cattails knocking against the handrails on either side are already crisping, and most of the songbirds have left, but there's still plenty of chatter and chirp to distract sister from her sniffing. She woofs at a squawking raven overhead, then gets so fixated on some gum underfoot that Len has to pull her away. When they come to their usual resting spot, one of the little lookouts built off to the side and ringed with benches, they find it occupied. A young couple, both smoking, both wearing dark glasses on this cold gray morning. As Len passes by, pulling sister back to his side and already trying to sight the next lookout, he hears the young woman say, "There are other issues besides that." One of those conversations from the sound of it. Remember them? Joan pelting him with words, him just waiting for it to be over. Do all women do that? Stir things up just when they've gotten settled and calm? Insist there is some other issue whose existence was always news to him, yet for which he was somehow always to blame? He never repaid her in kind. Could have. Could have pointed a finger, said a few words of his own. Would it have changed anything if he had? Or would he have found some way to turn it around and, as usual, blame him? Sister whines softly at his side, and he realizes he's been tightening up on the leash. Sorry, old girl. Let's have a bit of a rest. They come to the next lookout, which is vacant, thank God. Len sits stiffly down on the bench, feeling pain transfer from his feet to his knees, and never leaves now, just moves around. The fog has lifted. He can see where the boardwalk zigzags out into the marsh, then back around to solid ground. The surface of the water is pocked with single raindrops. A muskrat noses open a seam, then submerges again. This is usually when the simplicity of the place, its birds and animals living so completely in the present, settles him down and cheers him up. But he's morbid this morning, brooding on things best left buried. Must be the effect of that letter to the advice columnist. Damn fool woman wanting to wake from the dead in her husband's arms. Beats opening your eyes alone inside your own coffin, he supposes, having to heave against the lid, lift all that weight of dirt, claw your way to the surface in answer to the last trumpet sounding. Except without she sees it that way. Probably imagines things being all lovely and easy and miraculous. Likely hasn't occurred to her that when her husband opens his own eyes and sees his wife again, this time for all eternity, his reaction might be something less than unmitigated joy. Len hasn't a clue what happens after death and is not sure he cares. He stayed away from the church for a year after Joan's funeral, kept telling himself he'd never go back, but in time he did. And now he's there most Sunday mornings. It's an outing, a chance to see people. When Joan was alive, he only went because she was so involved with the place. She ran it the way she ran the Arts Festival Committee and the library board, hustled him into his tie and out the door every Sunday morning so as to have time to perch on the kneeler in front of their pew to pray, eyes shut, slightly smiling, lips moving. Len himself just sat. He had been raised a Presbyterian, and his parents had looked little and lost at the Anglican Mass Joan had insisted on for their wedding. Joan knew how to insist. It was her gift, how she got things done. They never talked about her habit of praying prior to a Sunday service, what she prayed for, what she believed in. Besides herself, that is. Yes, Joan Sparks definitely believed in Joan Sparks. A pair of mallards glide past, perfectly in sync, they upend to feed. Do they mate for life, Len wonders? Something else to look up. Imagine how serene that would be. This is your mate, there will be no other, so just paddle your feet and don't even think about it. But what if one of them dies? When the police came to the door with the news that Joan had been hit by a van while jaywalking across Maine, Len's first thought was, just like brother. His second was, I never told her. She'll never know that I knew. It had been close at times over the years. Oddly enough, the day he found out, it was easy. Maybe he was in shock. He got through dinner with the usual small talk about work. Had no problem leaving out the part about getting a headache after lunch, asking another teacher to supervise his spare, knocking off early. Walking home as usual, wondering if Joan would be there or off doing one of her projects. Then, from half a block away, seeing a silver Honda just pulling out of their driveway. Joan on the porch, watching it. Suddenly running down the steps, the car pausing, the driver leaning out, Joan bending to kiss him. Len seemed to know exactly what to do. Step quickly back behind a tall hedge and watch as the Honda passed him by, the driver invisible through the sunlit windshield. He felt as if he were in a play, performing a role he had been rehearsing all his life. Next, the script directed him to turn and walk to that little cafe around the corner, sit over one cooling cup of coffee until his usual coming home time. That night, he lay in the dark beside Joan, aware of the inches between them, feeling words crowding the back of his throat. Why? How long? What does he... It had been weeks since she had wanted him to touch her. But she had always been temperamental that way, and he had always just ridden it out, relieved and grateful to have her back when she came back. So that was what he did. And when in time she did come back, did slide those few inches to press up against him, all he felt was the usual gratitude and relief. And though he never stopped looking for it, he never saw the silver Honda again. To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much. What you basically did right there was give us a clinic on how to do an author reading. So I thank you for that.
Well, thanks a lot. I enjoy reading. I always enjoy it. So I don't have a feeling.
So first question I have for you is, why did you choose to use the paintings of Alex Colville as backdrops or starting points for each story in Late Breaking? Did you start with the painting or with the story, or was it some other combination?
In a word, yes. Okay. It varied. Well, what happened was in 2014, the Art Gallery of Ontario had a retrospective on Alex Colville, and I went because I'd always liked Alex Colville, but I didn't know why. And it was wasn't that marvelous the way they compared his work to Alice Munro and the Coen brothers? Just amazing. Anyway, I was between projects and I was kind of at loose ends. I didn't have anything to do. And I was standing in a room looking at those paintings, and the phrase, the Colville stories, went through my mind. And that was the working title for a couple of years, actually. I realized I could pull stories out of those wonderful evocative paintings. Now, as for your other questions, did the painting come first? Well, usually, yes. For example, the story I just read from is based on the painting Kiss with Honda. And it's actually Alex Colville and his wife, Rhoda. He frequently painted himself and his wife. And she's leaning down to kiss him. He's in this silver Honda, and they're exchanging a kiss, I guess, before he drives away. And usually, we look at that and we think, oh, isn't this sweet? This is a mature couple, and they're still affectionate. And then I had a wait a minute moment. I thought, what if I were the partner of one of those people and I came upon this scene? Suddenly it's not so sweet. So I found that the paintings were wonderful for that, because they would give you what they were ostensibly about, and then you went, wait a minute, what's underneath this? There's something very, very spooky about Alex Colville's paintings. Very disturbing. And you either like that kind of thing or you don't. Usually, as I say, I would be caught by one of the paintings and the story would start. Sometimes, and the story Flesh is an example of this, I would write the story and then go look for the painting. And I would always, by the time I was doing that, I was so steeped in Colville's work that it was as if I had subconsciously had a painting in mind, because when I saw it, I thought, yeah, that's the painting for this story.
And if anybody here is not terribly familiar with Alice Colville's work, just wanted to mention that so many of his paintings look like something really horrible is about to happen. Mm-hmm. And the people are just responding to it. Also, you mentioned in your reading, you mentioned mallards, wondering whether or not they mated for life. Well, I have it on the authority of someone who is a very frequent bird watcher who tells me the mallards do not mate for life and in fact are pretty randy, which may explain why there are so many of them.
So the party ducks of the duck world.
I just thought you needed, I just thought you wanted to know that. And
well, it's one of the geese. The geese do mate for life.
Randy ducks.
So mallards, no. Okay, well that's interesting. Thank
you. Randy ducks would make a good name, good stage name. Anyway, why did you choose refrigerator to put on the book cover? And a refrigerator is the unapologetically and uninhibited naked man and woman. So why did you choose that for the cover?
Well, I was having a chat with my publisher, Dan Wills, and we were talking about getting the book together about a year before it was actually published. And we agreed that we had to have a Colville painting on the cover. And we were looking at various possibilities. And I looked at this painting, which is quite arresting. And I said, how bold do you want to be? And it was his choice too. So it goes with the title, though it is not associated with the story Late Breaking. Still, you know, these people are having a midnight snack. They're naked. The only light is from the open fridge. And there are these cats winding around their feet, their bare feet. And there's actually, in one of the stories, Ollie Ollie Oxenfree, that scene is described almost literally. So it's very, very organic to the book. I think I told you that I did one TV interview and the book was projected on a screen behind me and the host, but they had pixelated the naughty bits. So,
that was in Hamilton, was it not?
It was in Hamilton, yes. Oh, well, but it was daytime TV, so they had to do that.
So with its recurring characters and the use of the same settings, Late Breaking blurs the distinction between the short story collection and the novel. Was that your intention when you started writing it?
Well, again, this book started with a phrase, the Colville story. And because the paintings I was looking at were discrete and individual, to me, the correct form for this book would be individual stories. That said, they are linked short stories, and usually the linkage is through character. So this is kind of fun because in one story, somebody might have a little tiny walk-on part, a little cameo, and then they might be the star or the protagonist of another story. So we get, you know, and it's almost like turning a prism and looking at all the different facets. It's great fun. In fact, I think I had, yes, no, it wasn't for this one. It was for All Saints. There was a story I wanted to write for a relatively minor character, and I just didn't have time. The deadline came, and that was that. So I don't know. His name is Dwayne, and I think I might revisit him sometime, give him a chance in another collection. But usually, as I say, the linkage is through characters. And I first came across this form, this technique, in my 20s when I read Margaret Lawrence's book, A Bird in the House. I had never encountered a book of linked short stories before, but that's what that is. And I was just very taken with the form. So
how much are your characters based on people that you know and have actually met? And also, if I ever end up as a character in one of your stories, can you make me better looking?
I can do anything, Marcel.
You have the power. it's very, very godlike.
I think you look just fine, and I love your hat, by the way.
Thank you. Seriously though, the question is,
Based on reality. Well, yes, again, yes and no. I don't think I have ever done, shall we say, a parody of some individual that I know. But what often happens is that with people I know well or with people I'm barely acquainted with, there might be a gesture or a mannerism or a habit of speech that I might borrow. There might be an anecdote that they've told me. In fact, a good friend of mine told me a funny anecdote about scattering her husband's ashes. And I said, you know, you should be careful what you say to writers because I might just use that. And she said, would you really? And I actually put that into one of the stories and she was delighted. I changed the name, of course, but so that's a little anecdote. I don't feel that, well, I guess technically this is exploitive, but I think it can be done decently. I think it can be done kindly. And if you're smart, you do it anonymously. And you don't tell people that, you know, you borrowed their lifted eyebrow or something like that.
so have you ever created a character just to be a form of revenge?
I have not.
Then you have that to look forward to.
Closest I've ever come is I've used someone's first name. And I've given a rather unpleasant character the same first name as someone who bugs me, but that's as far as it goes. Usually, you know, the name is something like Jim, you know, so who's to know, really?
Right.
Yeah. But no, I've never done that. I know people who have, and I really think that comes back to bite you. No matter how justified you may feel. I think if it not just because it's kind of a nasty thing to do, but because it has, it has nothing to do with good fiction writing, in my opinion. I think you're stepping outside of what you should be doing if you're doing that kind of thing.
So the follow-up question is how much of your fiction is autobiographical? And what I particularly would like to know is, did you ever live in the Runt House?
The Runt House. Okay, the Runt House is based on a house that I remember and did occupy in Vancouver for a, thank God, brief time when there was a housing shortage for students in Vancouver. So yes, the Runt House is something that I remember, including the ankle-deep floods that occurred in there. It was not a good time, and I don't remember. I don't know if at the time I thought, "Oh, I'm going to write about this," because at the time I was studying theater and very much interested in acting. And as for the autobiographical thing, well, you know, what else do we have besides our own lives? And it isn't so much that I take anecdotes from my life as I try to find myself in each character, and that's my acting training. When you're given a character, you are taught to build a kind of psychological bridge between yourself and the character, however thin and tenuous that bridge might be. Just something where you can say, yeah, I know how that person feels, or yeah, I've been there.
What is the one thing you think a fiction writer needs to know?
Keep it real. Fiction, good fiction, is very honest. And it's honest not in the sense that it's real or true, not in the sense that historical fact is or a newspaper account is. It's not journalism. But you know in your heart when you are writing truthfully, and you know in your heart when you're faking it. So keep it real. Keep it real. Yeah.
So the characters that were occupying the Runt House, they seem very realistic to me, like real people, which of course is what you're going for, isn't it?
All students want.
Yeah. So if you could only recommend one of your books to somebody, which one would it be? Would you have a favorite?
Oh, wow. That's like, you know, almost asking which is my favorite kid, but I'm told, I don't have kids, but I'm told that people who do secretly have a favorite kid, but they never, you know.
Sometimes it's not so secret.
I'm very fond of each of them for different reasons. A Litany in Time of Plague was my first. And though I would do things differently because I've grown as a writer, I still like that very much. I love late breaking in part because I've gotten so many emails from across the country from people saying, I'm so glad that you depicted older people as, emotional beings, sexual beings, people who can break their hearts, because so often we're just depicted as old coots. But you gave us life. So, I mean, I'm fond of that. I'm very fond of All Saints because I was nervous about writing it. I thought, who's going to want to read a book about a church? Come on. But it was popular. It was also the first of my books to be nominated for an award. So I was very, very pleased. I like them all. I love them all for different reasons. I hope.
Okay, not a terribly fair question. Here's another terribly unfair question. Ebooks, love them or hate them, or something in between?
Ebooks are fine as far as I'm concerned. I have no problem with the internet. We're using it right now. I have no problem with ebooks. For the record, I do not own an e-reader, but there's no reason that I might not. I did a lot of traveling last year for obvious reasons that we all know. I'm doing no traveling this year. But I remember thinking, if I do this again on trains, planes, and automobiles, I'm just going to get an e-reader because it's a lot easier to pack a few books that way. So I have I mean, when you think that we started by chipping away in stone, and then we were scrawling on scrolls, and then it was papyrus, and then we discovered vellum, and then we found that there was a thing called paper, and then the printing press came along. I mean, we've always read in radically different ways. And to me, it's important that people read, that people write and people read. I don't care how they do it.
Absolutely right. Then, for the record, do you have an iPad by any chance?
I don't have an iPad. I'm using a laptop right here right now, and I have an.
The reason I'm asking is that an iPad makes an excellent e-reader.
Yes, it would.
Yeah,
and
and
I've got several buddies who have them largely for that reason.
just so you know, I read Late Breaking in print, and I'm reading All Saints on my e-reader, on my iPad.
Well, thank you for doing both.
You're welcome. And it's one of those things that us in the library profession, we always want to bring this up. Our ebook usage has just gone through the roof since this pandemic, because people. Plus, before that, though, there would be people that would be in Florida for the winter, and they would come back and tell us, I don't even have to get out of my chair. I just go online and I get my next book. Anyway, that's a bit of a sideline. How many unfinished books do you have now? And also, you also mentioned that you had that one character that you wanted to get into the story, but get into the book, but you missed the deadline. So does that happen a lot to you? And do you think you will go back and finish those?
It doesn't happen a lot, but when it has happened, I've had the option of picking up a character years after and giving them some more space. For example, the character Kelly in All Saints appears in my first book, A Litany in Time of Plague, where she has just wandered into All Saints Church for the first time in the story Requiem. And so 20 years later in All Saints, she's doing a thing with the rector. So that's what happened with Kelly. I've kind of lost the thread here. What was
I was asking you if you had any unfinished books, and if you went back, and if you ever think you'd finish them, or do you have characters? Another question to add to this is, do you ever wonder what happens to your characters after the book? Do you ever rewrite them? And I think you partially answered that already.
I'll start with that. I have to say that, working on Late Breaking, when I finished the manuscript and sent it off to my publisher, I just missed those people so much, because for 4 years, every morning I'd gone to my desk and there they were doing their thing and telling me all about themselves. And it was a real little community. I know that sounds a bit spooky and you may be questioning my mental health, but any writer will tell you, as any actor will tell you, that they have a relationship with their characters. They're not puppets. You're not pulling the strings. It's a reciprocal thing. Yes, you're the writer, you're the actor, whatever, you're in charge ultimately, but The characters have a life of their own, and if you're smart, you let them wander around and you listen and you watch what they're doing. As for unfinished books, well, I have, and when I do teach writing workshops now and then, and I say to people, don't throw anything away. If you've got half a page of dialogue that is going nowhere, but for some reason you think it might go somewhere sometime, keep it. Keep it online. Keep it in a file. I mean, I have yellowing bits of paper, you know, and actually in Late Breaking, in the story Flesh, there is a segment in that story based on something I wrote, back in the maybe late 1970s before I was published. So finally, some of this stuff quickens, comes to life, and you can use it. And so don't throw anything out. If you think there's something there that might be useful, there is. As for unfinished books, as I say, I have a lot of fragments, and I do have a novel that I wrote, again, back in the 1970s that is in a drawer and will never come out of the drawer. I think every writer has one of those.
You mentioned that the characters sometimes, sometimes have a life of their own. I heard one author put it, and I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this person. I read it on Facebook, but he said basically that my characters just go out and do a bunch of stuff. All I do is write the incident report.
Exactly, and that's how it feels. Well, my favorite quote about that again comes from Margaret Lawrence, and she's referring to her first novel, The Stone Angel. The protagonist is an older woman named Hagar Shipley. And I heard Margaret Lawrence interviewed once, and she said, that old woman walked into my head one day and would not leave. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful.
So well put.
Yeah, yeah. And it gave me incredible permission to just have a relationship with my characters.
You mentioned your interest in theater. Or have any of your stories been made into films or TV series?
No.
Which ones do you think would be most suitable for that? I mean, I could imagine a TV series made out of Late Breaking.
Thank you. I was just going to say Late Breaking, I think probably has the most dramatic heft for that kind of thing. So if there's a filmmaker out there, I hope you're listening in.
So do you have books that you reread, or you mostly just one and done? Or does it a combination of both?
I do have old favorites. I was just thinking the other day, I want to, for possibly the third time, go through the entire works of Alice Munro. Because she's just marvelous, and reading her in order and seeing how she develops as a writer is just wonderful, and the stories are wonderful. A book that I go back to every 5 years or so is Robertson Davies' Fifth Business. Speaking of, that's a very theatrical book. And another book that I go back to every 5 years just for fun is Cat's Eye by Margaret Lawrence. Margaret Atwood. Oops, Margaret Atwood. Yeah. So, yes, I do have old favorites. Also, Hilary Mantel. I can go back to Hilary Mantel anytime. She's a wonderful writer. And Elizabeth Strout is another old friend reader that I go back to.
Do you have any relatively unknown or obscure authors that you think are undeservedly obscure and you'd like to give a shout out to?
I'd like to give a shout out to John Metcalf, who is the senior editor of Biblioasis and has written some of the funniest, wittiest works ever published in Canada. And I wish he got more attention.
Well, because he's a publisher, he's awfully busy though, isn't he? Probably has a time issue.
And he got the Order of Canada for the work that he's done with new authors. And he was a tremendous help to me. Another one I would like to recommend is Mike Barnes, who is a poet, novelist, and short story writer.
And a Hamiltonian.
And a Hamiltonian, yeah. Yes.
Is your Wikipedia entry accurate?
I haven't looked at it in ages. I should take a look at it. Why do you ask?
It's just a question I have written down here, just for fun.
I stumbled across it and I was vaguely flattered to be even in Wikipedia, to be perfectly frank, but I guess just about everybody is for some reason or another. So I haven't looked at it. I should look at it. I
So
should.
it says you were married to Greg Allman for 4 years.
What?
Nah, it doesn't say that. I'm just kidding you.
No, I was married.
Do you ever read your own reviews?
Yes, I do. Frankly, one of my nasty little secrets is that I love being in the media. For example, I'm very much enjoying this. I like being interviewed, and not everybody does, but I really enjoy it. So I guess that's the ego talking. But yes, I read my reviews, and I appreciate the ones who actually come out and say, well, okay, this could be better. I find that modern reviews often do not talk about technique, and I wish they did.
So, so you actually do learn something from them.
I can, if they get into writing as writing, but again, that doesn't seem to be getting done very often.
So how do you measure success as a writer? First of all, do you consider it awards and positive reviews, financial success, an audience that can't wait for your next piece of work, or satisfaction that you've done a good job? So are any of those things key to your success? Do you consider those components of success?
To some degree, all of them. But I will tell you one thing. I didn't really get a lot of attention until All Saints, which was the book before Late Breaking. And in a way, I'm glad of that, because way back when, in 1981, when I published my very first short story, it won a national award. And the effect on me was terrible. I didn't write for a year. Suddenly, I mean, that was my first publication, and it won this prize. And yeah, and I suddenly felt as if somebody, the ante had been upped. Somebody was staring over my shoulder. It all got terribly important, and I was blocked for a year. So I'm really glad that I didn't see a heck of a lot of attention or success in the usual sense until I had published a few books and was frankly rather mature, because I don't think I would have handled it well if I was younger. As for how I measure success, you know what the best thing is? The best thing is not the awards, not the good reviews. The best thing is sitting at your desk and you've just finished a paragraph and it felt as if the angels were writing it for you, and you looked and you said, yes, that's everything I want that paragraph to be. And that feeling will follow you throughout the day. You are bulletproof when you've done something like that.
It's like writer's high, is what I've heard that referred to.
Writer's high, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so writers have no choice but to write because they cannot ignore the voices in their heads. Agree or disagree?